Well, good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Miguel Cortines. I'm president of the Canadian Council for the Americas, Alberta. And thank you again for being with us in these weekly chats that we are hosting almost every Tuesday with different topics to share with you about what is happening in Latin America. And today is my pleasure to welcome Jorge Milanese with Sproule. How are you, Jorge? Good morning.
Good morning, Miguel. How are you? Thank you for the invite.
Thank you very much. And well, I want to appreciate Jorge for accepting the invitation just to share with us a little bit about an energy economic outlook on the Americas. Sproule prepared a outlook on the Americas in the energy sector, and I think this is a great opportunity basically for us to learn more about what is happening in Latin America, particularly in the energy sector. And I would like to welcome Jorge. And Jorge Milanese is Sproule's Regional Director for Latin America with over 36 years of experience in domestic and international business development, acquisitions and divestitures, corporate development, and upstream assets management. He had a leading role in a wide range of conventional and unconventional energy projects in North and South America. His areas of expertise include upstream investment opportunity identification, both in conventional and unconventional resources, reservoirs, financial and technical evaluation, strategy development, and contracts negotiation and administration of operated and non-operated joint ventures. And with that, I want to invite Jorge. He's going to share a presentation, probably a 20-minute presentation. And after that, we are very interested in listening to your questions. This is a very interactive conversation. So, Jorge, the floor is yours, or the screen is yours, I would say.
Okay, Miguel, thank you so much for the kind introduction. It's an honor to be here. CCA has been conducting these webinars, these weekly webinars, for some time now, and they have been all fantastic. So if you are new to these webinars, please join CCA in the next ones coming, because they always have a good pulse of what's going on in Latin America. This time, as Miguel said, what we are going to do is do a quick review of a report that Sproule produced on Latin America last February. We normally put together a report on Latin America every year, and this year is no exception. We have looked back at what happened in 2020, and we are also proposing an outlook of some things that may be coming in 2021. Actually, when we issued a report in February, there was all prognosis. You will see in some parts of the slides that we are going to share today that some things are starting to actually happen. So if you're not familiar with Sproule, we are a global energy consulting firm with very strong capabilities in geoscience and engineering, and we work with our clients around the world. This is a company that was started in Canada, in Alberta, in Calgary, almost 70 years ago. And as you see in the map, we have offices now on top of Calgary, which is still our main office, in Bakersfield, and Denver in the US, Mexico City, and The Hague in the Netherlands. We are around 140 professionals working in Sproule, and we have done projects in more than 90 countries around the world, every country in that dark green that you see here. So enough with the infomercial. Let's go to Latin America. What I'm proposing is to do a quick journey around Latin America in around 15 minutes. So a very quick remarks country by country. And then we can go into a more interactive Q&A with you all. So the first slide that I want to share with you is this one, and this is always somehow of a surprise, particularly to people that don't follow Latin America on a regular basis. As you see, we have put here the level of historical transactions in Latin America on the upstream side, and we are tracking actually in both graphs all the transactions above $10 million US dollars. If you track all the transactions, and there are multiple other transactions below $10 million, the number of transactions are significantly higher, as you can imagine. But the most important transactions are here. As you see, the country normally has a level of between 4,000 and 6,000 million US dollars per year coming out of M&A transactions. 2020, with all the issues that we all know about 2020, was a year in which we have seen transactions for over $2 billion. So even during the pandemic, there were multiple transactions being closed. As you can see here, what are the countries that have been most active? Brazil has always been very active in Latin America and is no exception during 2020. You see 20 transactions executed there. Colombia is another country where remarkably year after year, there is always a number of big transactions, Argentina as well, and several others. If you put all these together, there are over 50 transactions that have been executed in 2020. Let's go to Mexico. There are several important remarks in Mexico for 2020 and 2021. Mexico led Latin American exploration wells count in 2020. They drilled 30 exploration wells. And what is even more remarkable is that Mexico drilled more offshore exploration wells in 2020 than the US Gulf of Mexico side. So it's something very encouraging, because obviously with a lot of exploration activity, you have discoveries, and then discoveries led to investment in developments. As you all know, the country went through an energy reform in 2013, and there are more than 100 contracts signed with private companies and over $40 billion committed in exploration and development under those contracts. So Mexico has a very good intersection of technical and economic factors, and companies continue to comply with their commitments, but over that, do important announcements and developments. As you see here, during 2021, Eni, the Italian oil and gas firm, has to start delivering in the first FPSO to be operating in Mexico ever, to a level of around 90,000 barrels per day. Plus, there will be additional appraisal and drilling in Area 10 as well, an important well coming there. Equinor will be drilling the SIP well in the Area 3, and Shell has been drilling very important deep water wells in the north of the Mexican side of the Gulf of Mexico. The SAMA operatorship decision is up to the Energy Ministry in Mexico, so there will be eventually an announcement there as well. Look out for that. Going south, Trinidad Tobago is an island, is a nation that has over 100 years of experience in oil and gas production. 2020 and before 2020, there was multiple announcements of discoveries in the offshore. 2020 was a year for onshore discoveries. There were very significant announcements. Trinidad is one of the places where companies are conducting CO2 and enhanced oil recovery, and this is not very usual in Latin America, so I wanted to mention it here. Both Shell BP and BHP announced important capital projects out of the offshore discoveries that they conducted during 2018 and 2020. Because of this long track of experience in offshore, many services companies are offering resources to help Guyana and Suriname in the development of their discoveries offshore as well. During 2021, what already happened in March, Heritage and EOG, the US company, they announced a joint venture in the North Marine area. This is very important. Touchdown continue the Cascadura area um, test and drilling. They're preparing to drill Cascadura Deep, sorry, shortly. Shell will have first gas in 2 greenfield projects, and BP is drilling in the Matapal project with first gas expected next year. So as you see, a lot of activities in Trinidad. Guyana, obviously, is a rising star. The joint venture of ExxonMobil, Hess, and the Chinese National Offshore Oil Company have discovered over 9 billion barrels of recoverable oil in Stabroek. And Stabroek has already started production to the clip of 150,000 barrels per day. That will be increased with the help of a second FPSO that is due to arrive in Guyana as well. What is interesting here is that the government of Guyana has a share of the production that all these discoveries will bring. And up to December last year, they have already sold $250 million out of that share of production that they got from the offshore. So it's a very significant transformation that is ongoing in Trinidad. During January to March, ExxonMobil drilling Canje and Stabroek additional wells. In March, Tullow announced that they renewed the exploration phase with a second period up to 2023, and they have to drill 2 wells in the offshore. And the government is advancing with the local content regulation and the decision of the second bid round that probably will be held during 2022. Suriname, neighboring Guyana, is another place where there have been multiple announcements. Apache during 2020 announced 3 significant discoveries in the Campanian formation. But then in January, another well that they started in 2020 have an additional discovery. So they ended up the campaign with 4 discoveries, and now the development of this block is in the hands of Total, who has already started activities contacting to the development of these important discoveries. Also, Petronas drilling Block 52 and have another discovery during 2020. In March, Tullow drill in Block 47, a prospect called Golianberg. And Staatsolie is conducting a bid round for 8 offshore shallow water blocks that reportedly has a lot of interest from private companies. So also there will be announcements in the second part of the year in that regard. We go to Venezuela. Venezuela is a country worth following because it has obviously a big potential both in oil and gas. But I want to highlight the natural gas potential because in a recovery scenario, Venezuela will play a very important role for the production in Latin America. Venezuela has potential important production of natural gas in the offshore next to Trinidad and next to Colombia. And both the potentials, if they are fully developed, could be a game changer for the natural gas in Latin America that you know is a very important hydrocarbon for the energy transition. So regional integration in the future is going to be a very important role for Venezuela. In June, there is an expiration of the waiver that the U.S. State Department has granted to U.S. companies to continue operating in Venezuela. The waiver has been repeatedly extended during 2020. So hopefully that will happen again with this expiration. If we go to Brazil, it's very difficult to put everything that happened in Brazil in just one slide. But let me highlight 2 or 3 very important things. It's the only country in Latin America during 2020 increased the oil and gas production. They are producing over 3 million barrels equivalent of oil per day. So it's a very significant production in Latin America. Petrobras also started a big divestment program, particularly for their onshore and shallow water properties. That in turn has produced a very positive cycle of private companies investing more in Brazil, some domestic companies, but also foreign companies going into Brazil to have this chance of starting production or increasing production in existing producing blocks that were operated by Petrobras before. In February, we already saw the interest of Talos in a joint venture with local companies to buy Albacora from Petrobras. This is a very significant development. Talos is a very experienced company that is operating both in the U.S. Gulf of Mexico and then the Mexican side of the Gulf of Mexico as well. So their interest in Brazil is very remarkable. The other important development is the gas market liberalization in Brazil. The bill was approved in March. It was approved by the Senate in December, but then by the lower chamber in March. And this has started a very positive dynamic of additional businesses and developments in Brazil. It's something worth following because it has boomed with announcements on micro LNG, gas storage, regasification plants. It has really put a lot of dynamics into the gas market of Brazil. As you see here, I'm not going through all of these, but very important announcements for final investment decisions and first oil production in several places in Brazil. During 2020, 3R, a Brazilian company, did a very successful IPO, an initial public offering in Brazil. And PetroReconcavo may be a company that do the same during 2021. There is no timeline for this, but something that is worth following as well as the 17th bid round for exploration and production. That is announced for October this year. There are 92 blocks in several important basins in Brazil that will be available in this bid round. Brazil, as well as Colombia, these are the 2 countries that have what is called more or less a permanent bid round. So it's an open bid round where companies can go and express interest in certain areas or blocks without a set timeline. So it's come as you like, basically. And this is a method that has been very successful in Colombia. Colombia was the first country implementing the method, and Brazil is doing the same. And they have had, even during the pandemic, interest by companies in bidding for open blocks. If we go to Colombia, another country where it's difficult to put everything in one slide, Colombia has been traditionally the place of investment for foreign companies that wanted to start doing activities in Latin America. The biggest M&A transaction for Latin America was in Colombia during 2020, where Carlyle bought all the onshore assets of Occidental. The good news is Occidental is not leaving Colombia. They are concentrating their efforts in the offshore. So they will be drilling exploration wells in the offshore in Colombia. Colombia, as I said, has a very long-standing tradition of holding periodic bid rounds, and 2020 has not been the exception. There has been open acreage bid rounds, but most significantly, there was also a bid round for unconventional pilots. So during 2020, Ecopetrol was awarded a pilot in an area called Calais. And in 2021, ExxonMobil also put an offer for another area in the Middle Magdalena, and they got the approval. They are in the process of presenting the documents and getting the approval from the regulator, but ExxonMobil will be drilling a second pilot for unconventionals in Colombia. There has been several also important developments in natural gas and in pipeline transportation. Most remarkably, during 2021, in July, actually, there will be a bid round for an LNG regas plant in the Pacific basin, or in the Pacific border of Colombia. Colombia already has one in the Caribbean that is on operation, but a second LNG plant on the Pacific margin will also be a game changer because of the important development that normally the availability of natural gas has in all the countries. In Ecuador, perhaps you don't remember this, but Ecuador has very important highlights. In 2020, in January 2020, Ecuador left OPEC as part of the government fiscal sustainability program. And that was a very important and remarkable decision because it really lifted a very heavy weight from the private companies that are investing in Ecuador and producing oil in Ecuador. Petroamazonas, the national oil company, in 2020 merged with Petroecuador, so they're one company back again. That actually happened in January 2021. But Petroamazonas in 2020 continued with the development of Chpinco, Tombococha, and Tiputini, the iconic heavy crude oil fields in the Amazonian, in the Ecuadorian Amazonian. Let's go to Peru. Peru has one notable development during 2020, and that has been the production ramp up by PetroTal in Block 95. Basically, it's a company that started from 0 to 13,000 barrels per day, and they continue the development. They have announced in March 2021 the well 7D in the same field, Bretagne. But also Karoon drilled an offshore wildcat well during 2020. Unfortunately, it was a dry well that was in block T38. But I want to highlight this because it was a very well conducted operation, and Peru didn't have a lot of recent offshore drilling, exploration offshore drilling. So hopefully Karoon regroups and conduct drilling in the other blocks that they have in the offshore of Peru. As you probably heard, there is a new government to decide on bid rounds for Talara and Sechura. That will probably happen during the second half of the year or even during 2022. There will be a runoff for the executive government in Peru. Several companies are due to resume exploration and development activities, and there you have several names here that you could be in the watch out for following news in the press in the coming months. Going to Bolivia, Bolivia has a new administration that is implementing several actions. They have already announced an important exploration program conducted by YPFB, and you have here several wells. One of those has been already spotted in April, early April, but there are several others to follow in the rest of the year. Bolivia has been traditionally exporting gas both to Brazil and to Argentina, but both countries are ramping up their natural gas production. So eventually, the government in Bolivia has to decide on a new strategy, a new long-term strategy for the significant gas reserves and resources that they have in the country. Going to Uruguay, I want to mention Uruguay for several things. One of those is that Uruguay has been fairly successful in attracting companies to do offshore exploration. During 2020, they assigned the area Offshore 1 to Bahamas Petroleum. These are another country that I failed to mention that they have an open bid round. So there are several blocks available. And this is an example of Bahamas Petroleum studying the information that ANCAP, the national oil company, has put together in a very well-organized data room. But also I want to mention Uruguay because it's a country that has been consistently following a path of decarbonization. Uruguay, depending on the availability of hydraulic power generation, can generate between 90 to 98% of their power needs in a renewable way. To the extent that in certain months, Uruguay has been exporting both to Argentina and to Brazil green power. So this is a significant change in the dynamic for Uruguay, but also a very good example to follow in some other countries. Argentina has been multiple times in the press regarding Vaca Muerta, the iconic reservoir and basin that they have there. The government of Argentina is trying to incentivize the increase of oil and gas production, and they have different decrees and different measures that they have taken during 2020. And little by little, the activity is starting to ramp up again. Now there are over 20 active drill rigs working in Vaca Muerta, something somehow close to pre-pandemic levels. There has been also transactions in the offshore, and both the government of the provinces of Chubut and Mendoza are starting to rethink the bid rounds as well. So Argentina has a great potential in the Vaca Muerta. With great potential comes big responsibility and big problems or issues as well. So the country is trying to address that, and we can discuss that more during the Q&A. Last but not least, I want to mention Chile, because Chile is another country that has made important announcements for the energy transition, and particularly for hydrogen production. Chile has announced a very important program in order to become green hydrogen exporter in the next years. And they are also an example of other forms of energy transition in Latin America, like, for instance, geothermal energy. They have a unique development in Chile for geothermal. Mexico has also several geothermal examples, and some other countries in Central America as well. But consistently, Chile has been developing policy, and as you see here, the first highlight, it was the first country in the region to implement a carbon tax during 2014. So look out for further announcements on renewable energy policies and initiatives, because this is gaining more and more traction in Chile, but in other countries in Latin America as well. And with that, I want to stop here to start the more interactive part of this and the Q&A. So I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much, Jorge. Very excellent presentation and very condensed and very well presented. Before I'm going to, we will start to receive some questions, and please feel free to use the Q&A. And if you prefer also to raise your hand, if you want to have the question live, we can open the mic for you as well. I have a question before I go to the questions of the public. You mentioned about regional integration in Venezuela. What do you mean with that?
Well, it's not that it's going to happen overnight, but because of these great natural gas resources that Venezuela has in the offshore, developing those resources to do an integration both with Trinidad and with Colombia is a very attractive proposition. So in the case of the Mariscal Sucre, which is the area next to Trinidad, you know, Trinidad has been a very significant LNG exporter for many, many years. So they have already a 4-train LNG plant that is working perfectly well in Trinidad, and receiving natural gas from Venezuela and liquefying that natural gas is a very easy way for Venezuela to receive foreign currency and develop natural gas beyond what they may need internally in Venezuela for their own national consumption. Same goes in the offshore next to Colombia. Actually, there is a very significant discovery already on production there, the Perla field that is producing gas and condensate. But Perla is a fantastic field that has multiple TCF of reserves and resources. And so very easily can be an integration between Venezuela and Colombia. And actually, if you recall, Colombia was sending gas to Venezuela from the offshore, from the Chuchupa Ballena. So there is already a pipeline connection between the two countries. So perhaps of the two alternatives or possibility, that one is a low-hanging fruit.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much for clarifying that or abounding more about this. We have a question here from a guest that is joining. It says, aren't Colombia and Brazil becoming more unstable? Couldn't the impact, merger and acquisition, and additional E&P investments? Colombia has a business-unfriendly candidate ahead in polls for 2022, and Brazil has recently had polarization in Petrobras with military appointments. Any comment on that, Jorge?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, politics plays an important role in Latin America, not only in Brazil and Colombia, but in every country, right, in the region. My comment is that both Brazil and Colombia has seen a consistent policy towards oil and gas throughout many, many different regimes and presidents. If you recall, when Lula came as president, initially he wasn't very convinced of opening Brazil, particularly the offshore of Brazil, to foreign companies. And look at Brazil some years after that. So I think that both countries have developed such a positive momentum in their energy sector that it's very difficult that any single government can change that significantly. Even in Mexico, that we can mention as well as another country where you may put as an example of how politics play a role. What I always remark that Mexico has stopped the bid rounds, but hasn't gone back in the energy reform. So there are over 100 contracts signed, and there is rule of law. They are respecting those contracts, and companies have continued doing investment and doing developments in Mexico. And the same goes with Brazil and Colombia. I would say that Brazil is an interesting study case because as Petrobras have been divesting, has a very important divestment program over 70 blocks onshore and offshore. This is creating a different dynamic. So those are blocks that whose production is not decided by the government or by Petrobras, but is decided by private companies. And so when you begin having that important participation of the private investment in oil and gas production, it has less influence in the politics. What happened in Brazil is that Brazil has a very important consumption of refined fuels. And so the government is trying to control the internal pricing for the gasoline and diesel. But it hasn't had any impact so far on the oil and gas production. All the way around, actually, Petrobras have been conducting this divestment in order to allocate more resources to developing the offshore treasures that they have in the pre-salt of Brazil.
Oh, excellent answer. For Leo and Sola, we have a question. Any information on the development of the Gas Nor Pura natural gas pipeline in Peru?
No, not really. There has been, several announcements and studies, but as it happens normally when a new government has to come in place, those kind of important developments are somehow delayed. So Peru is a good example of a country that has been making natural gas accessible to more people in the country. And this is a very important development. The same goes in Colombia and in Bolivia as well. So more pipelines connecting the natural gas production coming from the greater Camisea area are always welcome. There is an important pipeline that was in the study and even in bid rounds, connecting Camisea to the south of Peru. But unfortunately, it hasn't come through. That is another pipeline that eventually, if it happens, and if the pipeline continues and connect Peru with Chile, for instance, it will be an important development for natural gas integration in the region.
Excellent. Thank you very much. From our good friend Ricardo Chona, that was with us just a few weeks ago. Jorge, can you comment more on Argentina and development of Vaca Muerta? What is the production, total wells, IPs that you know, and plan going forward for the active companies?
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Ricardo. Thank you for your question. Look, yeah, as I said, Vaca Muerta is an important resource for Argentina. If you compare Vaca Muerta with other unconventionals in North America, is in the first tranche of development. So there are roughly over 1,000 wells drilled in Vaca Muerta on production, and when you compare that with other developments like Eagle Ford or Bakken or Marcellus, where the companies drill more than 1,000 wells per year, obviously you understand very well that is just in the starting learning curve. But there has been important developments already. Petroleum developed 14 de Piedra, and they're producing natural gas for 14 de Piedra, and they are contributing that natural gas to the domestic consumption. during the post-pandemic, or I would say during 2021, most of the drilling has taken place for crude oil, and there is a good reason for that. While there is important and available capacity for transporting crude oil from Vaca Muerta, both for the national refineries, the local refineries, as well as for exporting, it's not the same with natural gas. Unfortunately, to fully develop the natural gas potential of Vaca Muerta, the country or the companies will need to invest heavily in natural gas transportation. So Vaca Muerta has the potential to even do LNG exporting from Argentina, but in order to do that, important pipelines have to be built. I saw recently an estimate of around $20 billion in investment. So that is something that doesn't happen overnight, and it's an important development to be followed. So in terms of IP, companies have been experimenting, as normally happens, with longer wells, bigger completions, more sand, etc. So the IP of the wells have consistently have been increasing, but still there is room to go. There is more to be done in Argentina, and with more wells, there are more knowledge coming to companies, and it's important and significant to remark as well that it's not only local companies participating in Vaca Muerta, but companies like Chevron, Shell, or ExxonMobil are also drilling and producing there. So all the good knowledge that these international companies have from other parts of the world is coming to Argentina as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We have one from Benigno Rojas. What is your take on the USA Biden policies towards oil and gas, and how this will impact Latin America?
Okay, Benigno, thank you. Very good question. So I'm not a political analyst, but what I would say is that there is no doubt that the Biden administration has put a lot of emphasis in renewables, and that is already happening. Nevertheless, bid rounds are still ongoing. In the Gulf of Mexico, there is a tradition of holding 3 to 4 bid rounds for the offshore, and that is still happening. So I think that although you may not see an increase of development, particularly in federal land, on the private side, and this is one important difference between North America and Latin America, that landowners can have private agreements with oil and gas companies, something that doesn't happen in Latin America, right, where the law is different. But I think that going to Latin America, there is a very important opportunity here, and that is helping with all the technology and the capabilities that the US have on renewables, helping Latin America on the energy transition. And that, I think, is an important role that the US can play, and Canada as well. Actually, many Canadian companies are active in Latin America, and they are already contributing to that. So we can talk more about that, but I think that that change of policy of the US towards Latin America will be positive.
Excellent, thank you. From Ricardo as well, also on Argentina, what is the offshore activity?
Not much, unfortunately. So the last bid round was conducted, let me see, 2-3 years ago, and it was very successful. So there were multiple contracts signed with important companies that have a lot of experience in the offshore. Like I mentioned, Shell during the initial remarks, but also Equinor, for instance. So eventually, those companies will start drilling in the offshore, but I haven't seen announcements so far. Shell, as you saw during the initial remarks, have been getting more participation in one of the offshore blocks. So any discovery, gas or oil in the offshore, will be a game changer for Argentina because of this issue with the not very easy connection from the west to the east in the country. So hopefully that may happen in the future, but I haven't seen much activity on the offshore side.
Excellent. Thank you, Jorge. From Jeff Martin, sorry, good member of the CCA. Besides the lead by Chile in the area of hydrogen ammonia, what is the trend through other Latin American countries for this development?
Okay, it's a good question. No doubt, almost every country had made announcements, but on top of the announcement, let's see. I mean, Colombia did an important announcement to go more into hydrogen or start doing hydrogen piloting, and actually Ecopetrol, I think they will conduct a pilot, a hydrogen pilot in Colombia in association with one of the local universities. There has been announcement in Bolivia, announcements in Brazil. Brazil is, I would say, is the other country where it's more than announcements, but certain companies have started the analysis of projects, particularly in the north of the country, in the port of Açu. There has been two announcements of green hydrogen plants coming out of the availability of solar and wind power generation in that area. And the plan there is to eventually export hydrogen, green hydrogen from Brazil to Europe. And actually, the port of Açu is a very significant development because there are agreements between ports around the world, and Port of Açu has an agreement with the Port of Rotterdam, which is a very important facility for green hydrogen in Europe. So I think that location is worth looking at, and it's worth following, because as well as Chile is doing on the Pacific margin, Brazil is definitely going into that direction on the Atlantic margin.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, I have a question. So what is your vision, Jorge, and your experience of the future of energy in the region? How do you see the balance of energy in the region in a more efficient and balanced formula in Latin America?
Right. I think Latin America has great resources, natural resources. Oil and gas will continue to be a primary source of energy for a long time. I think that Latin America will follow a different path from what we are seeing in North America or in Europe, because basically we do what we can, right? There are many priorities regarding infrastructure that has to be taken care of in Latin America, and we see that in countries like Guyana, where they are blessed with this windfall of production. They will, in no time, they will become the richest of Latin America, and they are planning a lot on how to transform their country. There are only 800,000 people living in Guyana. But, and as you can imagine, there are multiple things that they have to do, from roads to power generation to sanitation, everything, right? So I think that Latin America will follow a path in which we will take advantage of everything that we have in the toolbox. Renewables is another tool in the toolbox, and it's already playing a very important role. Latin America is not like Europe or the United States in the sense that it's not very well connected. not in terms of pipelines or transmission lines for power generation. So what is called individual generation or a small regional generation of electricity through renewables is very appealing and very convenient for Latin America, because you don't have to plan on a national grid that costs billions of dollars. You can generate electricity where you need, very locally. And that is a remarkable development in Latin America. We have seen wind and solar booming up in almost all the countries in Latin America because of that. First, the level of investment is far lower than planning on a full field oil and gas development or a dam for hydroelectric power generation. So those levels of investments are more in tune with what countries can do in order to bring in more power, more electricity for their communities. Just on top of my mind, I recently read that 5 million people in Colombia still don't have access to electricity, and they are burning wood or other forms of biomass in order to get, to fulfill their needs for cooking, for instance. So look at the reality of Latin America is definitely different, and this is why for me, it's a blessing that we have so many alternatives in terms of power generation. So it's not that that we only have a hammer and everything looks like a nail, right? We have different alternatives, and that is what we are deploying in the region.
Is the pandemic and the implementation of digital economy is going to help to develop more rapidly the region, do you think?
I mean, definitely, we have seen, certain trends that there were lukewarm before the pandemic that now they are definitely established. Things like this. I mean, it's very easy, cheap to connect to each other digitally. But in terms of the economic reality, Latin America in general is different from the developed world. So there are a big chunk of the population that they have to go out of their homes every day in order to look for what they are going to eat in that day in particular. So it's a lot of informal economy, and that part of the economy is more difficult, to convert into a digital form, right? And this is why the region will follow a different path in the energy transition.
Excellent. Thank you, Jorge. We have another question from Benigno Rojas. With the Brazil divestment in onshore, what has it been the appetite so far on the private sector to participate in the onshore sector in Brazil?
It has been great. I mean, it has been a game changer, Benigno, because Petrobras is divesting assets that most of the time they are still on production. So they have wells already drilled, they have facilities. The thing is, like what happened with any big company, and it's not an exception with Petrobras, those assets were at the bottom of their portfolio, so they were not receiving a lot of attention. And so for a private company that can come with new interpretation on the geology side, on the subsurface, or new methods of production or drilling, it's a very easy proposition to increase production very quickly. And this is what it has been very attractive to private companies in Brazil. So Petrobras has been very successful in the process. And as I mentioned, not only local companies that have taken the chance of increasing their production and their scope of work, but also foreign companies that were looking exactly for that kind of chance. Because when you go for the first time into a foreign country, it's very important to have some initial cash flow coming out of existing production. And so that opportunity is not always available in Latin America, and particularly in Brazil. So Petrobras putting for sale that part of their portfolio in order to dedicate their effort, their people, their resources in the offshore, in the bigger field, has been very, very positive. And the same may happen in other countries in Latin America if the national oil companies that are always, the biggest participant in the oil and gas sector, take a similar approach. I know that Ecopetrol put for sale 9 fields, I believe, last year, and hopefully they go through the process, because those opportunities are always very positive in order to dynamize and to bring in more investment into the countries.
Thank you, Jorge. So, based on your experience and just on the analysis that Sproule made about the energy sector in Latin America, what are, in your opinion, if you have to choose 3 best markets for Canadian companies that have technologies that are more feasible for the region, what could be your main choice of 3 countries? Or I don't know if this is fair question, but more appealing to fair. Canadian companies, right? To Canadian technologies, so America or North American technologies, if you want.
Right. No, and Miguel, is a question that we get very frequently when we discuss Latin America, and we always mention 2 countries initially. One is Colombia, for all the reasons that we already discussed. Colombia is open for business, has a very long tradition of upholding the rule of law, is very liquid in opportunities. So in any given year, there are always multiple opportunities for all the flavors. If you want to do exploration, if you want to do development, if you want to implement enhanced oil recovery, for instance, there are multiple opportunities in Colombia. And Canadian companies have traditionally been very, very successful. There are an array of multiple Canadian companies operating in Colombia successfully. So I think that it is and will continue to be a country where companies normally look as a first priority because of all these, collection of very positive characteristics. It's a country where the 2 main factors that normally companies analyze come together. So when a company analyzes an opportunity in a foreign country, they analyze the subsurface, and that obviously have to be a check mark. And then they analyze it above ground, what happens in the country risk. And in both cases, Colombia always have a very high marks, and this is why companies continue to analyze and to invest in Colombia and to go to Colombia over and over again for more opportunities. The same is starting to happen in Brazil, particularly for smaller companies and startups. Brazil has always been very attractive for big IOCs, international oil companies, because of the size of the price, right? There are wells in the offshore that only one well produces more than 50,000 barrels per day. Imagine that. But in order to get there, you have to invest very serious money, right? And not all the companies have access to that kind of financing. But with this dynamic changing in the onshore, Canadian companies in particular can do a remarkable job because of what I have described. There is an array of fields that are mature, that hasn't been fully appraised or fully developed. And this is kind of the bread and butter of Canadian companies, where they can do a fantastic job in order to resume production, apply more modern or better technology, EOR, even in transportation in midstream. there are multiple opportunities for connection. I didn't mention much about this, but the gas liberalization market have also opened up the opportunity for other kind of midstream developments as well. So it's not just for oil and gas companies, it's for services companies and for midstream companies as well. As you asked for 3 countries, I think that the third country, I have to say it depends. Depends on what you're looking. Obviously, Argentina is a very obvious choice if you want to participate in unconventionals in Vaca Muerta, and there are open opportunities there. But look at Peru. The north of Peru and Ecuador as well has a combination of heavy crude oil that is attractive also for Canadian companies that have perhaps the best experience worldwide in developing heavy crude oil. So I will look at what happened in Ecuador in the next few months with the new government. It seems that it's a government pro-industry, pro-economy, more open to foreign investment. And if that is the case, there are multiple blocks that can be very easily put for bid in Ecuador. Blocks in the north, in the border with Colombia, and in the south, in the border with Peru. And both have very interesting features. Like in the north, Ecuador has 2 pipelines, one operated by the government, by Petroecuador, that is called SOTI, that transport a blend of heavy and light oil. But there is a private pipeline that is OCP, that stands in Spanish for heavy crude oil pipeline. It has 450,000 barrels per day of capacity, and I think that is transporting in the range of 100,000 today. So heavy crude oil in Colombia is getting to the OCP to get exported to the Pacific. But any development in the south of Colombia or the north of Ecuador, particularly for heavy crude oil, has a very easy transportation and a very cheap one, particularly when you compare transportation tariffs with Colombia. In the south of Ecuador, there is no pipeline, but in Peru, there is an important pipeline running from the jungle of Peru to the coast of the Pacific Ocean. So any discoveries in Ecuador eventually is an easy integration and transportation with a pipeline in Peru. And this is why both countries may be also attractive for investments. PetroTal is a good example that it can be done, and it can be done in a very very responsible way with a good, excellent, I would say, relationship with the local communities. And this is an example to follow.
Excellent, Jorge. No, excellent question, and I really, really appreciate your time just to share with us your knowledge and this energy report that Sproule prepared. And thank you very much to you, and see you soon. And to everybody that is watching these weekly chats, this concludes our weekly chat today. Next week, we don't have a speaker, but we are going to send you an invitation for a meet and greet. Going to be for members. If you are not a member yet, you can sign in to be a member of the CCA. And yeah, just we are going to have this meet and greet, so you can have a chat with the other members. And on May 4, we are having healthcare in Latin America. The future is digital with Dr. Neil Parsan. He's a high-level expert in the topic of healthcare. And hope to see you soon. Thank you very much, Jorge, and everybody. Have a great morning. And
thank you, Miguel.
Bye.
Take care, you all. Thank you.
Hasta luego. Buenos días.
Hasta luego. Bye.